The rain was pouring down, mixing with the tears on my face, but my sister didn't care. She didn't care that we had just buried our mother. She didn't care that our father was lying in a hospital bed, paralyzed by a massive stroke, unable to speak or move. All she cared about was power. Standing there, right next to Mum's fresh grave, Jessica pointed a manicured finger at my face and screamed loud enough for the entire funeral procession to hear. Get out of my sight, Lily. You are done leeching off this family. Mum is dead, Dad is a vegetable, and I am in charge now. You get nothing. No money, no house, no sympathy. I stood there, humiliated, clutching a cheap plastic bag with my only possession, an old, heavy family portrait in a wooden frame. It was the only thing she let me take before kicking me to the curb. I felt like my life was over. I felt like garbage. I walked away from the cemetery that day, homeless and broken, thinking Jessica had won. She was the heiress. She was the beauty queen. She was the legitimate daughter. Or so we all thought. But as I walked away, I didn't know that the heavy picture frame I was carrying held a secret. A secret that would not only destroy Jessica's life, but would hand me the keys to her entire empire. She thought she was the queen, but she was about to find out she wasn't even part of the bloodline. To understand how sweet my revenge was, you have to understand the hell I lived in for 18 years. My name is Lily, and in the Walker household, I wasn't treated like a daughter. I was treated like an unpaid intern who slept in the basement. From the moment I could walk, the dynamic was clear. Jessica was the golden child. She was 2 years older, blonde, demanding, and absolutely perfect in my parents' eyes. I, on the other hand, was the mistake. My father, a stern man who built a construction empire from scratch, barely looked at me. My mother was worse. She was a social climber who saw Jessica as her mini-me and saw me as a burden. If Jessica wanted a new car, she got a convertible Mercedes for her 16th birthday. When I needed money for a school field trip, I was told to go mow the neighbors' lawns because money doesn't grow on trees. The injustice wasn't just about money. It was psychological torture. I remember one Christmas, Jessica opened 20 gifts designer bags, jewelry, the latest iPhone. I sat there waiting for my turn. My mum handed me a single wrapped box. My heart raced. I thought, finally, they see me. I opened it. It was a vacuum cleaner. So you can clean your sister's room better, my mum said, sipping her champagne. Jessica laughed so hard she spilled her drink on the rug. Guess who had to clean it up? I cried myself to sleep that night. But the seed of doubt had been planted years before by my grandmother. Before she passed away, Grandma was the only one who showed me kindness, but she was senile in her final years, or so everyone said. One afternoon, she grabbed my wrist, her eyes wide and cloudy, and whispered something that haunted me. "Don't worry, little bird," she wheezed. "Treat you bad because they know one of you isn't really theirs. The adopted one always causes trouble." For years, I was convinced she meant me. It made sense, right? Why else would they treat me like trash and Jessica like a princess? I spent my entire teenage life believing I was the adopted charity case. Oh, how wrong I was. Things went from bad to worse when I turned 18. My father, the only person who held the family empire together, suffered a massive stroke. It happened at the dinner table. One minute he was yelling at someone on the phone about a contract, and the next he was slumped over his plate, gasping for air. The doctors saved his life, but they couldn't save his mind. He was left paralyzed, unable to speak, trapped in a bed in the master bedroom. He became a living ghost in his own house. You would think this tragedy would humble my family, but it only unleashed their true nature. With Dad incapacitated, my mother didn't know how to run the business. She was lost. But Jessica saw an opportunity. She immediately stepped in, claiming she was the heir apparent. She had no degree, no experience, and no work ethic. But she had the arrogance to match my father's. She started signing checks she didn't understand and firing employees who had been with us for decades just because they looked at her wrong. I tried to help. I offered to take care of Dad so we wouldn't have to hire expensive nurses. I spent my nights changing his sheets, feeding him with a spoon and reading to him, hoping for a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Sometimes I saw tears rolling down his cheeks. I think he knew what was happening. I think he saw the monster Jessica was becoming. But my mother was too busy trying to maintain her social status to notice the company was bleeding money or that her husband was miserable. She was in denial. And then, denial ran out of time. 3 months after Dad's stroke, my mother had a heart attack in her sleep. Just like that, she was gone. The buffer between me and Jessica had evaporated. I was devastated, not because she was a good mother. She wasn't, but because she was the only thing stopping Jessica from completely destroying me. The morning after Mum died, I was in the kitchen crying, making coffee, when Jessica walked in. She wasn't crying. She was scrolling through her phone, looking at funeral flower arrangements. She looked up at me, her eyes cold and empty, and said, "Stop whining, Lily. It's annoying. And by the way, move your stuff to the guest room. I'm turning your room into a closet for Mum's vintage coats. She won't be needing them anymore." I couldn't believe it. Her body wasn't even cold yet, but I bit my tongue. I swallowed my rage because I had nowhere else to go. I thought if I just kept my head down, I could survive until I found a job. I didn't know that Jessica had already planned my execution. She was just waiting for the audience. The day of the funeral was gloomy and grey, a perfect reflection of my life. Hundreds of people showed up, business partners, fake friends, distant relatives, all pretending to care. I stood in the back, wearing a simple black dress I had bought at a thrift store because Jessica had cut off my access to the family credit card weeks ago. When the service ended, everyone gathered around the grave. Jessica stepped forward to give a speech. She talked about love, legacy, and family unity. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. People were wiping tears, whispering about how strong she was. I felt sick to my stomach. As the crowd began to disperse, Jessica signaled to the family's security guards. They walked over to me, flanking me on both sides like I was a criminal. The chatter died down. The silence was heavy. Jessica walked up to me, her heels sinking into the soft mud, a cruel smile playing on her lips. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. "Lily," she announced, her voice projecting so everyone could hear. "I've been looking over the family finances. Since Mum is gone and Dad is indisposed, I am now the sole executor of the estate." She paused for dramatic effect. I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. "And I've decided to cut the dead weight," she continued, staring right into my eyes. "You are not a walker. You've never acted like one. And you certainly don't deserve to live off my hard work. You are officially evicted. Effective immediately." A gasp went through the crowd. I stood there frozen. "Jessica, please," I whispered. "Don't do this here." "Not today. I'm doing it exactly here," she hissed. "So everyone knows. You are out. You have nothing. No money. No home. I packed a bag for you. It's by the gate. Now get out before I have security throw you out." I looked around, hoping someone would step in. Hoping an uncle, a cousin, anyone would say this was madness. But they all looked away. They were afraid of her. They were afraid of the power she now held. I walked to the gate, tears streaming down my face, humiliation burning my skin. My bag was a garbage bag with a few clothes. Leaning against it was the only thing she allowed me to take. A large, old portrait of our family from 10 years ago. A picture of happier times, or at least times when the lies were still hidden. I picked up the heavy frame and walked out into the rain. I had hit rock bottom. I was 18, an orphan in all but name, and homeless. If you think no child should ever go through this, please hit the like button. It helps me know I'm not alone in sharing this story. I spent the next 3 months living a nightmare. I slept on friends' couches until I overstayed my welcome. I spent a few nights in a cheap motel until my meager savings ran out. Eventually, I found a tiny, rundown studio apartment in the bad part of town. It smelled of mold and the neighbors screamed at all hours of the night, but it was mine. I worked double shifts as a waitress just to afford ramen noodles. Meanwhile, I saw Jessica on social media. She was destroying the company, throwing lavish parties, and selling off Dad's assets to fund her trips to Dubai and Paris. She was burning our legacy to the ground, and there was nothing I could do about it. Or so I thought. One Tuesday night, I was packing my things again. The landlord had raised the rent, and I had to move to an even smaller place. I was exhausted, angry, and clumsy. As I lifted a box, my elbow knocked the heavy family portrait off the table. It hit the floor with a loud crash. I groaned, kneeling down to pick up the pieces. The glass was shattered, but the wooden frame had also cracked open. As I pulled the photo out of the broken frame to save it, I noticed something stuck between the photo and the cardboard backing. It was a thick, yellowed envelope. It looked old. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Written on the front in my father's handwriting were the words, "To be opened only in the event of my death." My heart stopped. Dad wasn't dead, but he was gone mentally. This was meant for a time when he could no longer protect the truth. I tore open the seal. Inside was a birth certificate and a legal letter from an adoption agency dated 22 years ago. I started reading, and the world stopped spinning. The name on the adoption certificate wasn't mine. It was Jessica's. I read the document over and over again until the words blurred together. Jessica was adopted. My parents had taken her in when she was a baby because her biological parents were in prison for fraud. That was the irony of the century. The sister who called me a leech and a criminal came from a long line of con artists. But there was more. Beneath the birth certificate was a copy of the family trust. I scanned the legal jargon until I found the paragraph that changed everything. It stated clearly, in the event of the parent's death or incapacitation, the entire estate, including the construction company and all real estate, shall pass exclusively to the biological issue of the Walker bloodline. My father had never updated the trust to include Jessica as a full beneficiary. Maybe he forgot, or maybe deep down, he knew she was dangerous. The document explicitly stated that adopted children would receive a fixed stipend of $5,000 and nothing else. I sat on the floor of my roach-infested apartment and laughed. I laughed until my sides hurt. I laughed until I was crying. All those years of being treated like a servant. All those years of believing I was the unwanted one, and the truth was the exact opposite. I was the heir. I was the owner of everything. Jessica was legally entitled to $5,000 and a handshake. I held the evidence in my hand. I could destroy her reputation instantly, or wait to take everything she owned. What would you do in my place? Would you forgive them or destroy them? Let me know in the comments below. I was done being the nice girl. I didn't call Jessica. I didn't send her a text. I knew that if I tipped my hand too early, she would find a way to shred documents or hide money. She was a snake, and you don't step on a snake's tail unless you're ready to cut off its head. Instead, I took the last of my savings and bought a cheap suit from a discount store. I walked into the biggest law firm in the city, the one that had sued my father's company years ago. I knew they hated the Walkers. I asked to see a senior partner. The receptionist looked at my cheap shoes and tried to turn me away, but I slammed the trust document on her desk. "Show this to Mr. Henderson," I said. "Tell him the real owner of Walker Construction is here." 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a corner office with 3 lawyers. They looked at the papers like hungry wolves looking at a steak. They told me I had a slam-dunk case. They told me they could freeze Jessica's assets within 24 hours. No, I told them, I don't just want the money. I want her to feel what I felt. I want public humiliation. Mr. Henderson smiled. "Well, you're in luck. According to the Business News, your sister is hosting a massive rebranding gala this Friday night. She's planning to announce that she's selling the company to a foreign investor for millions. It was perfect. She was going to sell my legacy to cash out and run. The gala was going to be filled with the press, the board of directors, and the entire social elite of the city. Draft the papers," I said. "We are going to a party." The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. The lawyers secured the court orders in secret. I spent the time mentally preparing myself. I wasn't the scared little girl who cried in the rain anymore. I was a Walker, and I was coming for what was mine. Friday night arrived. I didn't have a limousine. Took a taxi to the luxury hotel where the gala was being held. I could see the paparazzi flashing their cameras at the entrance. Jessica was there, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my entire existence, holding a glass of champagne, laughing with the people who had watched her kick me out of the funeral. She looked radiant. She looked powerful. She had no idea that the girl she evicted was about to walk through those doors and burn her world to the ground. I walked past the security. One of them recognized me and tried to step in my way. "You're not on the list, Lily," he grunted. I held up the court order stamped by a federal judge. "I own the list," I said calmly. "Step aside, or you're fired too." He blinked, looked at the seal on the paper, and stepped back. The doors swung open. The ballroom was bathed in gold light. Soft jazz was playing. Jessica was on the stage, tapping a spoon against her glass. The room went silent. "Thank you all for coming," she beamed into the microphone. "Tonight marks a new era. The Walker legacy is evolving." I am proud to announce that I have successfully negotiated the sale of the company. I stepped into the middle of the room. The crowd parted as I walked toward the stage. My heels clicked loudly on the marble floor. "Stop!" I shouted. My voice didn't shake, it echoed off the walls. Jessica froze. She squinted against the spotlight. When she saw me, her face twisted into a mask of pure fury. "Security!" she shrieked. "Get this trash out of here! How dare you crash my night?" "It's not your night, Jessica," I said, climbing the stairs to the stage. I stood right next to her. She looked like she was about to slap me, but she hesitated when she saw the thick folder in my hand. "It's never been your night," I continued, turning to face the shocked audience. "And it's not your company to sell." "You're delusional," Jessica hissed, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "Get out now, and I won't have you arrested." "Arrested for what?" I asked, smiling. I pulled the microphone from the stand. "For trespassing on my own property." I turned back to the crowd. My sister forgot to mention a small detail about the Walker family history, a detail she tried to bury along with our mother. I held up the yellowed birth certificate and the trust document for everyone to see. "Jessica isn't a Walker by blood," I announced. The room gasped. "And according to our father's irrevocable trust, she has no claim to this company, this money, or even the dress she is wearing." Jessica's face went pale. She lunged for the papers. "Give me that! You liar!" I dodged her easily. "The police are outside, Jessica. And the lawyers are already seizing the accounts." She looked around frantically. Her friends were stepping back. The investors looked furious. Her kingdom was crumbling in real time. But I wasn't done. I wanted her to beg. "It's a fake," Jessica screamed, her voice cracking. She looked like a cornered animal. "She forged it. Security! Throw her out!" "She's jealous because she's a failure." But the security guards didn't move. They were looking at the tall, grim-faced man walking up the stairs behind me. It was Mr. Henderson, the lawyer. He took the microphone from my hand. "These documents are authentic and have been verified by the Supreme Court this afternoon," Mr. Henderson said, his voice deep and authoritative. "As of 4 p.m. today, all assets previously under the control of Jessica Walker have been frozen. Any attempt to sell or transfer company property is a federal crime." He turned to Jessica, who was trembling in her designer heels. "Miss Walker, you are trespassing on private property. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises." The silence in the room was deafening. You could hear a pin drop. Then the whispers started. The investors who were kissing her ring 5 minutes ago were now turning their backs. The friends who drank her champagne were checking their phones, pretending to be busy. Jessica looked at me, tears of rage and desperation streaming down her face. "Lily, you can't do this. We're family. We're sisters." I stepped closer to her, invading her personal space just like she did to me at the funeral. "Family?" I asked quietly. "Family doesn't kick their sister out into the rain. Family doesn't steal their inheritance. You said it yourself, Jessica. I'm not a Walker." "Well, it turns out, neither are you." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a check I had written earlier. "But I'm not a monster," I said. "The trust says you are entitled to a stipend." I shoved the check into her hand. She looked down at it. It was for $5,000. "That should cover your rent for a month or two," I said. "Now, get out of my sight." She tried to lunge at me, screaming obscenities, but this time, the security guards moved fast. They grabbed her by the arms, the same guards she had hired, and dragged her off the stage. She was kicking and screaming, her dress tearing, her mascara running down her face. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Seeing the look of horror on my mother's face was the sweetest victory of my life. Karma had finally arrived. If you love seeing karma served instantly, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the next story. After that night, everything changed. I moved back into the family home, but the first thing I did was sell it. It held too many bad memories. I used the money to clear the company's debts and hired a team of competent people to run it properly. I made sure my father had the best private care money could buy. He lived for another 2 years in comfort. Even though he couldn't speak, the first time I walked into his room as the owner of the company, he squeezed my hand. I think he knew. As for Jessica, the last I heard, the $5,000 didn't last long. She tried to sue me, but no lawyer would take her case. Rumor has it she had to move 3 states away and is working as a hostess at a budget restaurant. She spends her days seating people at tables, forced to serve others, just like she tried to force me. I sometimes look at that broken family portrait. I fixed the frame, but I kept the crack in the glass. It reminds me that sometimes you have to break everything to find the truth. Thank you for listening to my story and supporting my journey to justice. It means the world to me. But if you think my family was toxic, wait until you hear the story on your screen right now. It involves a stolen inheritance and a secret that destroyed an entire town. Click now. You won't believe how it ends.